بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله وسلم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. اللهم فقهنا في الدين وعلمنا تأويل وألهمنا رشدنا يا رب العالمين. اللهم أرنا الحق حقا وارزقنا اتباعه وأرنا الباطل باطلا وارزقنا اجتنابه ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. اللهم إنا نستهديك لأرشد أمرنا وزدنا علما ينفعنا وعملا يرفعنا وأحوالا وأخلاقا ترضى بها عنا يا أرحم الراحمين. وصلى الله وسلم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. Alhamdulillah, so welcome everybody to this event on the Hanafi Legal Code Program. Inshallah, we'll be going for approximately 30 to 40 minutes. I'll try to I'll try to be brief as much as I can. And then we'll have some time for questions and also hopefully some time for conversation with some of the students of the program. The other thing to note is that if you have any question at any point, you can simply post it. What I'll do is, so I'm actually going to now, so can somebody just check that they can actually still message myself? So you should only be able to message me now directly. So can somebody just check that, inshallah? So if I receive a message, then I know that's working. So basically, if you have any questions at any point, you can send them. And I think that will kind of streamline, so we don't have people coming in saying salam and exiting and saying salam or whatever, and kind of distracting. It's easy for me to kind of then keep track of any questions which come up. Okay, so I assume that, so nobody's able to do that? I guess I have to go back to, so I guess I have to leave it on. Let's see. Okay, I got it now. So now if somebody tries it. Yeah, okay, excellent. Yeah, wonderful. Yeah, so I think I pressed the wrong thing. Okay, so let's get started. So I have like a number of messages now. Yeah, great. Yeah, somebody's asking if we'll get kicked out if 40 minutes. No, nobody's going to get kicked out of anything, inshallah. Okay, so the other thing to note just before I begin is that I guess I'll be using sometimes technical terms, words which are perhaps unfamiliar to people. The nature of this discussion is it's a bit of a technical discussion, right? So it's about the program, it's about the text, it's about what's going on, and it's not about whatever paradise and the rivers of Jannah. It's not about iman boosting, but it's a bit technical. It's a bit, and that's the nature of what, of course, we're talking about right now. So please do bear with me, and also recognize that this is not like a lesson. This is just a presentation. Everyone's going to have questions and I won't be able to address every single question. I'll try to address some of those questions that people may ask. And otherwise, I'll do my best to kind of present what I can. So first of all, what exactly is Irshad? So for those who don't know, and you've still signed up, mashallah. So Irshad is basically an educational initiative which seeks to instruct students of sacred knowledge in timeless classics of Hanafi sacred law and legal theory, i.e. in classical books of Hanafi fiqh and Hanafi usul, and seeking to provide a deep and holistic understanding of the school, i.e. thereby. Of course, we have various offerings for those who are unaware. So previously we've had some classes on Hanafi usul. So most recently we covered Samtul usul. There's also the present classes on Kifayat al-Mubtadi, which is listed here as the beginner sufficiency on Hanafi fiqh. So that's an ongoing class right now. There's also a class on the Hidayah of Imam Marghinani. Of course, so the classes which are offered on different levels, right? So for different people, sometimes aiming at people who are beginner students, sometimes intermediate students, and sometimes more advanced students of knowledge. So just as we have classic kind of texts, we also have specialized courses which we offer. One of the most popular ones is, of course, the history of the Hanafi school, which is presently being run by Dr. Salman Yunus, and we have Sheikh Muhammad Shaheen, who is Yasir Shaheen, who's running the Madaris al-Madhab al-Hanafi, which is on the Hanafi fiqh traditions. And then there's also this course, this intensive, which is presently, it's about to end, which is on women and fiqh. There've also been a number of events which we've had last year. I think it was December the 5th. I'm not sure if the date's there. Yeah, so it's December the 5th. We had this event on Hadith Sunnah and Hanafis, and also on March 28th. So earlier this year, we had this event on Istihsan of the early Iraqi Hanafis. And inshallah, there's also another event, or more events, which will be scheduled in the coming months and hopefully years. But anybody who's missed out on any of these events, you can go to the YouTube page, the Irshad YouTube page, and you can find those recordings there, inshallah. Of course, there's also a number of publications which are hopefully going to be coming out sooner rather than later, although some still require some work. And this is partly due to the program, right, to facilitate for students to actually have texts in their hands rather than struggle to find sometimes texts, such as the Mansak al-Saghir, which we'll be talking about very shortly, which is part of the program, but it's obviously it's not published as a standalone text. So the one text here, there's an original text here on the laws of fasting. There's also work, Khulasatul Qaidani, which is like an extensive work on the fiqh of prayer, which we'll also talk about very shortly. Very finally, there's also the journal. So I'm not sure, there might be scholars, mashallah, amongst you, might be advanced students of knowledge, it might be just people who are very interested in Hanafism. So there's now a journal, inshallah, the first edition. Again, we hope to have it out, very soon. I can't put a date on it just yet, but we're working as fast as we can to ensure that we can get the first issue out as soon as possible. And this is basically, it's the Journal of Hanafi Studies, which is a peer-reviewed biannual journal that encourages research and discussion on all aspects of the Hanafi tradition. So we have, mashallah, a number of scholars on the board, such as Dr. Islam Ido and Malna Bilal Ali Ansari, Dr. Sohail Hanif, Dr. Salman Yunus, and Dr. Hassan Shahawi. So mashallah, we have people who have been through who are kind of seasoned scholars and also have been through the academy and have very high standards and also a deep knowledge, whereby they're able to assist writers and authors and also ensure that what's produced is actually something that's of a very high standard. Of course, we're very flexible, and if you go on the website, again, you can read about what opportunities you have to submit, and very open about what you can actually submit. So it's not just like a 50-page paper or something. That's well beyond the limit anyway. But it's also shorter things, even shorter book reviews and biographies and so on and so forth. So there's things you can read about. Inshallah, if you go to the website, you can see that there's an opportunity even for Fadawa to be published. So this is the journal. So this just gives an overview. I know it's kind of very brief, but it gives an overview of some of the activities and some of the things and the projects which are ongoing at Irshad. But of course, everybody is here today to hear about the Hanafi Legal Code Program, which is, for those who are unfamiliar, it's a 5-level course which will take students through a formal holistic study of the Hanafi school via an innovative, pedagogically structured curriculum. what does that mean? We'll see it. So inshallah, that's what we're going to be talking about now. Before we get into the particulars, I want to talk about Takween al-Faqih al-Hanafi, which is about the making of a Hanafi jurist. So Imam Sarakhsi, who's a great early 5th century Hanafi Imam of the who has some encyclopedic works such as his Mabsut, and he also has a lengthy work on Usul, which is just called Al-Usul of Imam Sarakhsi. And basically he has a statement in there whereby he explains what it means for somebody to truly have fiqh. And basically he breaks it down into 3 parts. So he says you have to have knowledge of the legal rulings, of the rulings of the Sharia. You have to have knowledge of the, what I'm calling here, maxims of the law. And that's because I'm referring to different things, right? So I've just kind of left it as maxims. And finally, there has to be practice. Of course, practice is a more personal activity. So I'm not talking about that. That's on, that's your own moral, obligation. But in terms of how to learn and become a faqih, then you have to know the legal rulings. So what are examples of legal rulings? For instance, a completely random ruling. One may not pray a fard prayer behind an imam praying a nafila, right? So if there's an imam who's praying like a general, a nafila, he's praying his sunnahs of dhuhr. So you cannot pray your fard of dhuhr behind this imam, right? So that's an example of a fara, of a legal ruling. And then you have something that is like an usuli principle. And here specifically with respect to how to derive law from the primary texts, from the nusus al-shar'iyya, and that's here where it says the command in the primary texts is indicative of an obligation, right? Of course, these things may be completely meaningless to a number of you, that's fine, right? So what I want the takeaway to be is the general idea are not the specifics. So it's more like the universal ideas rather than the actual specifics of, the specific examples and so on. Because those types of things, you can only fully and completely understand them. You can only fully and completely understand them when you are, when you actually take the time to study, right? To study and learn. And it's something develops within you. So another example, one may wipe over a khuf, right? So if you're wearing foot gear, you can wipe over it. And similarly, and that's why I kind of left it as maxims, just to kind of show some of the underlying usul. So usul of different types. So you have usul of fiqh, as it were. You have usul of, for deriving fiqh. So for instance, what's the nature of a rukhsa? What does it mean for something to be a dispensation? What is the scope of istihsan, right? Can you extend what's istihsan? Again, these are technical kind of terms, but if you know, if you don't know, it doesn't matter, because as I mentioned, it's not about the specifics, but it's about just the general ideas. That's the main takeaway. So again, just the idea that there's these other things that you have to kind of connect to fiqh to kind of have a complete and a deep and a holistic understanding of the mas'ala and the masail of fiqh. So this is why he says, Imam Sarakhsi, he says, وَضَبْطُ الْأُصُولِ بِفُرُوعِهَا, right? So that's not just the usul in terms of deriving law from the primary text, but it's actually more than that in terms of the usul which apply to each mas'ala. What's the asl? What's the basis for the imam's position, Abu Hanifa's position? And that basis, contrary to what people are popularly taught, is not always just some random hadith or a random Quranic verse. Rather, it's some ma'na, it's some meaning, something which has been extracted from a group of texts, which may comprise of two Quranic verses and 3 hadith which are transmitted by the fuqaha of the Sahaba, like mashhur hadiths, for instance. A completely made up example, but just to kind of show, and then there's some type of ijma' and so on, and you kind of bring all of these things together, and we extract some type of meaning from all of these things, and then this is the asl or the basis for the imam with respect to a certain issue. And sometimes this issue can apply to different issues as well. So inshallah, that's something that's going to come up in very shortly in the slides. So connecting between the usul and the furu' is essential for a complete, meaningful understanding of the madhab. So again, truly and fully and completely understanding what exactly this means requires one to actually take the time to sit down, to try to study and try to learn, understand what's going on, but not really simply sitting down and having laws of fiqh read to you, right? So it's not just about listening to those laws. Of course, that's part of it, that you have to understand what's going on and what and how to practice. But the idea is that there are things behind the rule, right? There are things, which are essential to the establishment of that rule. And to get fiqh properly, right, and deeply, you have to understand the things which are behind the rule as well, which are beneath the rule, and that's the idea. Again, what are you going to walk away with? A general conceptions for what we talked about today, and it's not essential that you understand, every single thing and example that's kind of mentioned in today's presentation. So I don't want anyone to feel kind of that they're kind of missing out because they're not understanding terms. Just focus on the broader ideas, and of course, if you are familiar with some of the terms and the like, then of course you can focus on exactly what's being discussed. So the nature of the mas'ala, which I've mentioned here as like a question or an answer, because the idea is it presupposes a question. So there's a question: what are the fara'id of wudu? What are the obligatory acts of wudu? And then there's an answer: fara'id al-wudu'i arba'atun. The fard actions of wudu are 4. So but the nature of this mas'ala is that it is a repository of meanings. So what that means is that there are layers of fiqh which underlie each mas'ala. Right, so each issue of fiqh, there are many layers of meaning, and you can kind of continue to go deeper and deeper until you arrive almost at the lub, or the heart, or the soul of the issue, right? So and of course, many of the ulama, the commentators, certainly so the commentators in the madhab, this is what they're trying to give you something of, and at varying degrees of success, right? So some texts become more popular, and some commentaries become more popular because they are the scholars and the ulama and the people who wrote those texts were able to do a very good job in extracting the at least some kind of layer of meaning, because at the end of the day, many of the ulama, they shortened lengthy texts which they would have otherwise written, because the students became lazy, right? So students became lazy, so they said, nobody's going to read this, so I have to shorten my 10-volume text, 10-volume work, and make it into a 1-volume work or 2-volume work. So again, just as a completely random example, so a person will miss a rak'ah of the congregation if they wash their limbs thrice in the wudu, but not if otherwise. So this is like a random mas'ala which you find, but the idea is that you can either take this as it is at the surface level, or you kind of delve into the mas'ala, and sometimes, of course, there's depth that you can go into, and sometimes there might be only i.e. that you can go very deep, or you can sometimes only go to a certain point, because it's connected to other masail and the like. So here, just to give examples of some of the meanings which you can extract from a mas'ala like this, is that the sunnah of congregation is more important than the sunnah of washing thrice. Even though both are considered to be a sunnah, one has priority over the other. So catching the entire prayer is a proper fulfillment of the duty to pray in congregation, which is something, of course, even the scholars of usul, Hanafi usul, that they mention. Similarly, leaving a sunnah with an excuse is considered to be permitted, right? And generally, you have to have fiqh fi din, right? You have to have knowledge. You have to understand. You have to take the time to study, so you don't end up doing that which is wrong, right? But thinking that you're doing something right? Because this is a form of jihad, right? So the idea is that, well, I'm going to wash 3 times because this is what the Prophet ﷺ told me to do, right? Or told us to do. That's true, but what are you supposed to do when there's a conflict of duties? This is where fiqh comes in, right? And what ends up happening is that if you don't have the fiqh, then you can end up doing something wrong. We're not talking about ithm, we're not talking about sin, we're not talking about going to the hellfire, but we're certainly talking about doing something that's you've missed that which is proper, that which is optimal, that which you're supposed to do in this particular case. Similarly, just to give other examples of underlying ma'ani and underlying meanings in fiqh. So these are just completely random, but they're not necessarily listed. They're not stated in the text itself, right? So sometimes it is, and sometimes it isn't. Sometimes in the commentaries, sometimes it's kind of you have to read between the lines. But I've called here they're just called like topic governing principles. So travel is connected to movement, and residency is connected to intention. So that which usually occurs is akin to that which always occurs. One cannot join between the substitute and the thing substituted for. So again, sometimes going to be in the commentary, sometimes it's there, sometimes it's one commentary, it's on the other commentary. The idea is that sometimes they're giving various perspectives, right? So they're giving a perspective on the underlying, what they consider to be the underlying meaning, and other scholars consider perhaps they're giving you a different perspective on it. And sometimes, like I mentioned, they'll get to the heart of the issue. Sometimes they'll take you close to the issue, but it's not the entire journey. So of course, all of this is important, right? Because you see from the majalis of Imam Abu Hanifa, the sessions and the circles of Abu Hanifa, circles of learning, sometimes they would be debating a mas'ala for a number of days, right? So sometimes for weeks. If it was just a case of just what you do, they could just solve it in 5 minutes, right? But it was actually, there was a lot of thought which went into the mas'ala, such that when they actually came to a conclusion, they concurred on that answer, they would actually do a takbir. They would say Allahu Akbar, and then everybody together would say Allahu Akbar, and people would know that the majlis, i.e. the circle of Abu Hanifa, they've come to a conclusion about a certain issue. So these principles, they can be universal, which means that they go across chapters. Sometimes they can be particular, and when I say particular, then they can be specific to a certain chapter, or they can sometimes even be specific to a certain issue, as we talked about earlier on. So again, all of these things relate to depth of meaning, right, for the masail of fiqh. And this is what I was alluding to earlier on when I said the usul of fiqh rather than usul for deriving fiqh. So the first thing I want to talk about is the foundations level. So the foundations level is, presently it's 2 hours a week. And what it attempts to do is to ground the student in the required proper adab, right? So the proper adab required of a talib al-ilm, of a student of knowledge, sound interpretive methodology, and the essential masail of both fiqh and usul. So the idea is that from the get-go, you study fiqh and usul together, right? So the idea is that when you walk away from even just the foundations level, if that's the only thing that you decide that you're interested in, then you walk away as somebody who is educated in the madhab of Imam Abu Hanifa. Education in this context means that you have an understanding of the history of law. That's something that we study, the history of the Hanafi madhab, the imams of the Hanafi madhab, what's the distinction and difference between hadith and fiqh, what's taqleed, why taqleed, what's ijtihad, why can't we all just be mujtahids following a madhab, these types of discussions. So you kind of you become rooted in sound methodology, right? You understand how the deen, how you're supposed to function as a person, as a religious person, and somebody, and certainly if you're coming to classes like this, as somebody who is educated at some level in their deen. And then you have the books on usul and fiqh. Here we're covering Mabadi' fi ilm usul al-fiqh, which is one of the shortest texts that is probably out there in Hanafi usul. Al-Rawdat al-Saniyya fi fiqh al-Hanafiyya, which is by Ibn Bilban al-Farisi, which was chosen because it covers the ibadat. It also covers the halal and haram. It also covers various adab. It covers other chapters like, so when I say adab, it's like the adab of sleep, for example, the adab of waking up. When I say halal and haram, it's like for instance, the clothing that you can wear, that which you cannot wear, that which you can say, that which you cannot say, whether you can use gold and silver utensils, and so on and so forth. Similarly, has sections on hunting and the udhiyah, the ritual sacrifice. So it's a very comprehensive text, which allows you to cover all of the essentials, but also go beyond that by studying chapters that people don't normally study. So people study tahara and salah and saum, so fasting and prayer and purification, maybe zakat and hajj if they're interested. But that's the extent of people's study. But fiqh is, of course, more than that. So this is a very nice comprehensive text. What you can see in brackets is the approximate time that we spend on that particular text. And then you have Khulasatul Kaydani, which is a book on the prayer, on the fiqh of the prayer. So it's quite an extensive text, and there were, as far as I can recall, tens of commentaries which were written by great ulama on it. So it was considered to be quite a staple text amongst the ulama. So it's something that we do study. And also we have a book on hadith, which is Sifat Salat in Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam fi daw ijtihad madhhab al-Hanafi. So it basically goes through the prayer and mentions the hadith, which are congruent with the madhhab. And then we have Ta'lim al-Muta'allim, of course, the work of Imam Zarnuji. I think it's had a couple of translations as well, maybe 2 or 3, maybe more translations. So it's widely available. But it's of course written by a Hanafi, and it's all about the adab, or the proper manners of a talib al-ilm. So this is the foundations level. So if this is the only thing you walk away with, then inshallah you walk away with being grounded in proper interpretive methodology. You understand what Hanafi usul looks like, Hanafi fiqh. You studied adab, and you also know what the history of law looked like, right? And you also understand why we follow madhabs and so on. So inshallah you're grounded in that way. Beyond that, then once you've done that, then you proceed on to the main part of the curriculum. So people are welcome to join either at the foundations if they want to begin from ground zero, as it were, or they can kind of jump into level 1 if they've had prior reading and study, right? So if they've had prior reading and study. So before I got into that, I just want to talk about 2 keys to knowledge acquisition, which is number 1, gradual progression, which the tadarruj here, and also sound methodology, like a manhaj, which is sahih. If you don't have these 2 things, you end up with holes in your learning, right? Because you jumped from a very basic text to a very advanced text, so you didn't do anything in the middle. And similarly, if you don't have a proper methodology, then you end up with a lack of coherence in your learning. This scholar is saying this thing, and the other scholar is saying the other thing, and the third book that you read, he's saying something else. So everything just ends up being confusing. And of course, to remedy this, you need to have these foundational primers which are studied before the details and the commentaries. So al-alim al-rabbani alladhi yu'allim sighar al-ilmi qabla kibarihi. Right, so the lordly scholar is the one who instructs and teaches in the small sciences before the big sciences. Right, so you have to study those small things, and you also have the humility to recognize that you have to go from the basic levels to a more intermediate level to an advanced level. You cannot simply jump to advanced levels. And similarly, recognition of various traditions, fiqh traditions, usul traditions, aqidah traditions, and then follow one in a sound manner, whilst recognizing the basis for differences, right? And that when you do that, then you recognize, okay, well, this is, there's another position on something which is different because of A, B, and C, right? Or this other thing is different because of X, Y, and Z, and so on. So with that said, we also want to talk about steps to mastery in fiqh. So in order to attain mastery, there's certain things which you need to do. This is not the only things, but these are some of the things, and they are so mentioned here because we do, inshallah, most of these things in the program. So furu' al-fiqh are the actual ahkam fiqhiyah, i.e. the books of fiqh themselves, and then the usul al-fiqh, i.e. books of Hanafi usul, and then qawa'id al-fiqh, books of qawa'id, but also understanding those qawa'id through our readings in both usul and fiqh. And then subject-specific works, which we do from the very get-go. And finally, lots of tafri'at, right, which means reading a lot of masail of fiqh, because that's essential to getting a holistic and a deep understanding of the madhab. So at the foundational level, we have levels 1 and 2, which we'll see in just a moment. So you have a reading of Kifayat al-Mubtadi in fiqh, and then Mukhtasar al-Quduri. In usul you have Mukhtasar al-Manar, and then Samt al-Wusul. And then here I've just added the revelatory sciences, just to kind of show how at the various levels, sometimes we're reading something in hadith, sometimes we're reading something in tafsir, right? So we're doing like a commentary of something in hadith, or a commentary of something on the a work that is talking about the ayat al-ahkam and the like. Of course, the context of everything, that this is a legal code program, we're talking about fiqh, right? So it's a fiqh heavy, as it were, program. It's focused on it, you know, it's a very specialized course, right? So we're not just talking about, we're not covering just general texts, as it were. We're being very specific about what's being studied and the goals of each level. So this is very complicated, looks like a very complicated diagram with kind of arrows going everywhere, but it's basically some of the books of the madhab and some of the chains, at least going down to Kifayat al-Mubtadi, which is the very first text that we study. And then we have Mukhtasar al-Quduri, which you can see, which is more like an essential text. It's like a central text. That's why you can see there's no arrows going into it, but there's many arrows coming out of it. And Kifayat al-Mubtadi, you can see it's at the very bottom here, and you can see that there are a number of arrows coming from texts which also have many arrows going into them. So it's almost like a summary or culmination of the efforts of many of the ulama who came before. And that's the nature of fiqh, and that's the nature of how knowledge progresses through the generations and new texts which are written. Similarly in usul, and these diagrams are important because they're also representative of the kind of manhaj which we're following. So over here in usul, we have like the usul, the Bazdawi way of usul, and that goes back to usul al-Bazdawi over here. And of course, all of these details and these discussions, we have like classes on them in the program. So I know it may look kind of overwhelming and lots of words and names and text and the like right now to somebody who's unaccustomed to any of to these types of things. And that's why I'm just kind of pointing out that look here, look where it's circled, because this is the foundational kind of level. So as for the details, you can of course see them. So if you go to the Irshad website, you can go and you can find, just in the interest of time, you can go and you can find the page on the curriculum on the Hanafi Legal Code Program. You can read through the curriculum over there. So this is basically what we study. We have 7 subjects for both level 1 and level 2. And currently their schedule's at 3 hours a week. So these levels attempt to ground the student in the Masail of Imam Abu Hanifa and fiqh, the usul of the madhab, and clarity regarding the hadith method of the Hanafis. And you can see that there's also these specialized kind of works over here. This is where this is specialized text on the fiqh of Hajj. And then you have sometimes we do specialized text where we are covering just doing tafri'at, right? So we're just covering more Masail of fiqh. And that of course deepens our connection with the fiqh and the masail, and we're able to kind of join things together and so on. So this is level 1 and level 2. And then we move on to the intermediate levels, which are levels 3 and 4. You have Multaqa al-Abhur and Sharh al-Wiqaya, which are studied in fiqh. And then for usul, we have Nur al-Anwar and Muntakhab al-Husami. Of course, like the Husami first, and then Nur al-Anwar. And then we have Tafsir Ayat al-Ahkam. And then we also have the Muwatta, Imam Muhammad ibn Hassan al-Shaybani's recension of the Muwatta. So he, of course, studied with Imam Malik, and then he wrote, he added his own kind of comments to the hadith, which he transmitted from Imam Malik. So these are the intermediate levels. And again, you can see from the same diagram that we're just on the left-hand side now. Multaqa al-Abhur Wiqayat al-Riwaya. This is the basic text for Sharh al-Wiqaya. I'm not going to, I'm kind of, in the interest of time, I'm trying to be brief now to get through the remaining slides. But this, like I mentioned before, is, we discuss all of these things, and you'd kind of learn all of these things and what these texts mean and what these arrows mean and everything as we kind of study. Similarly, in usul, you have the Manar here, and also Muntakhab al-Husami, still staying within this Bazdawi line of usul. So these are levels 3 and 4, which are attempting now to ground the student in the ta'lilat, or some of the meanings at a deeper level of Imam Abu Hanifa, even though we're doing that at some level, even in the foundations, right? So even in the foundational levels, rather, not the foundations, but the foundational levels, we're doing that, but we're doing it at a much deeper level when we get to levels 3 and 4. And also depth in the usul of the madhab, so you get the depth and the breadth across the various texts, and also being able to kind of explore now and being adequately trained so you can access different commentaries and go across different traditions as well. And then application of the usul on the primary text and in the real world. So that's also because we cover here Rasmul Mufti, right? So the art, basically the art of being a Mufti, and the texts which kind of train one in that. We also have our final reading over here of Aqidah, right, where we read Azhar al-Rawdat, which is, or is it Ashar al-Rawdat, sorry, which is the text by Hassan Kafi al-Hisari, which is like a multaqa. So it's a gathering of many hadith texts, many aqidah texts, and then he made a matan out of all of those. Right? So just like Multaqa al-Abhur over here is a gathering of a number of texts in fiqh, and then he made a matan out of it. So there's also one like that for aqidah. So that's what we study at level 3, and that's pretty much the end of the aqidah studies, and then we focus on other things after that. And then finally, you have the advanced levels where we cover the Hidayah, also Sharh and Usul Bazdawi, and Tafsirat al-Ahmadiyya, which is basically by the author of Nur al-Anwar. So he wrote a commentary on the Quran, on the Ayat al-Ahkam, and where he's simply applying Hanafi Usul to the text, to the Quranic verses. So we can see real applications. Of course, we do a basic version over here, right? So at level 3, but then we do a more nuanced and technical and detailed and advanced version in level 5. So again, level 5, what are we trying to do? This seeks to complete the student's journey in the madhab by giving them depth and breadth in the masail and usul of Abu Hanifa, and training them in producing scholarship which is relevant and meaningful. So at this level 5, we also not only study advanced texts such as Al-Ashbah al-Nadha'ir, which is a specialized text, and also Al-Ahwal al-Shakhsiyya by Qadri Basha, but we also do, there's writings which need to be produced, right? So students have an opportunity to kind of train into how to write in a scholarly way, and also use all of their training, everything they've learned, to produce answers and fiqh, which is meaningful in the real world. Right. So this is level 5, and of course you can see this, it culminates in the Hidayah, which is also a seminal kind of early text in the madhab, which everyone's familiar with. It's also what we began with in today's session, something that's already a course offering outside of the curriculum on the Hidayah, but this is now we're talking about within the curriculum itself. And then Usul Bazdawi, right? So you can see that we remained within this realm, right? So this is part of having clarity in Manhaj. That's pretty much, I mean, I would have said a lot more, but I tried to go as quickly as possible in the interest of time. So even in that at that speed, it's taken up pretty much the extent of time that I wanted to spend on this presentation. So finally, in terms of support, then of course we'd be honored to receive your supplications, and also if you could spread the word in your own circles of influence, whether that be online, social media, amongst friends and family, for people who are interested. Of course, it's a very specialized course. It's not going to be of interest to somebody who just wants to learn how to pray, but somebody who is interested in more depth and more education, then of course this may be of interest to them. Of course, take classes yourself and study, whether that be within the curriculum, whether that be outside of the curriculum, whether that be here, whether that be elsewhere. Support financially if you're able to do so. We always get requests for scholarships and the like for students who wish to take the program, but they're not able to kind of pay the fees. Then of course, if you are well off but you don't have the time, then you could also support students who are interested in actually taking part in the program. Volunteer, there's things which can be which we could do with a hand with, and then also follow at Irshad classes on across social media, so you can help and share in the various announcements which are made, helping to get the message out there, because there's many people who seek out certain texts, who seek out programs and the like, but they can't find an adequate outlet or place or sheikh or an imam or somebody who is actually teaching this text or that text or the other text. So we have something in place. So there might be people who are interested, and they'll only find out about it if the news reaches them. And finally, join the mailing list, because that's also an opportunity to kind of keep up and support even from a distance. And also, there's an opportunity to kind of share that with friends and family through email as well. And alhamdulillah, this brings us to the very end of this presentation. So if you have any questions now for myself, and also or any of the students, then of course you are welcome to ask them, inshallah. So I'm just going to see if I can, so I'll stop this now, inshallah. So alhamdulillah rabbil alameen.